The topic for this week is about how to count rows in garter stitch. And this is something that I've seen in my lessons lately as a problem for students when they're trying to calculate gauge. When you're trying to calculate gauge, it's very important that you have to know how to count stitches and rows. And although I do cover this in other blog topics, this has happened so many times recently, I feel like I need to do a special one. When you look at garter stitch, you've got these lovely little ridges, and many knitters think that those are the number of rows. But if you look closely and you stretch it, you can see that each ridge is actually composed of two rows. There's a row here and there's a row here, and that is what's making the ridge. So if I am counting ridges when I'm calculating gauge, I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. That's not 9 rows, that's 9 ridges, but it's very easy to do the gauge calculation by just multiplying that by 2. Now, another thing that people have had difficulty with lately is figuring out the number of stitches and when they're doing a gauge swatch. And what I tell them in the materials, but they don't often see it, is that the easiest way to figure out how many rows you have or how many stitches you have is to take notes when you're making your gauge swatch. So for example, in this swatch, I cast on 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Notice I'm counting the frowns in garter stitch. And so if I am going to be measuring the gauge, and I generally do not include my selvage stitches, if I cast on 10 stitches, then my gauge number would be 8. And for rows, if you count the rows as you do them, then this can give you a help as well if you take notes, and then you don't have to try and count them, particularly if you're having difficulty counting rows and stitches. Now, seed stitch also causes problems. And if you look at seed stitch, it is where the stitch alternates on every other row from a purl stitch to a knit stitch. And so the way not to count seed stitch is to count the purl bumps. Generally speaking, this is what I've seen my students do. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. So they say they have 14 rows. Clearly I have way more than that. If I remember that my purl bump is followed by a knit stitch, that'll help. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. I have 14 purl bumps. And since I have a knit stitch at the top, and I have a knit stitch in my first column here, I can just multiply 14 by 2 to get 28. Now, if I count my purl bumps, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, but it was shorter and I just had a purl bump at the top, then I would know that I had 27 rows. Not that hard. Now, something else that comes up a lot is when we do the master's program or for the swatches in the course, or actually in the industry as a whole, we require that swatches be tagged in the upper left-hand corner of the swatch. And the reason for that is this enables whoever is looking at it to quickly see where the top and the bottom are. If it's always in the upper left, then you know, okay, this is the right way for it to be for a photo shoot. And often the people at the photo shoot aren't knitters, and so they may not know. Now, in the master's program, we require it because it enables us to see if a knitter can read their work. That is, tell the bind-off edge from the cast-on edge. And that's important because when you turn the swatch upside down, the stitches are upside down. And it does make a difference when you're trying to calculate the gauge, particularly if someone else is looking at the work for you. So anyway, those are just a couple of pointers for my basic students on how to count garter stitch rows, how to count seed stitch rows, and to be sure to know the difference between the cast on and the bind off edge.